All right, welcome. Today, we're doing something a little different. Think of it as a clinical audit. We're going to move past all that soft language about hoping for a better future and get into the hard science of actually engineering one. Yeah, this is all about protocol, not prayer.
So let's just dive right in. The source material for this kicks off with a pretty brutal diagnosis. It says that what we often call wishing or praying for change is actually a systemic flaw. You know that feeling, crossing your fingers, just hoping for the best? Well, the source argues that's really just admitting we don't have a solid plan.
And that brings us right to the core problem we've got to dismantle here, what it calls the engineering fallacy. It's this deeply mistaken belief that just wanting something is a functional part of making it happen.
I mean, look at how the source reframes hope here. It's not some guiding light, it's a high entropy leak. Think of it like this. It's all that valuable energy you're just bleeding away because your own system, your personal architecture, is just too fragile to guarantee its own outcomes.
Okay, now this is really interesting. Look at the contrast on this slide. On one side, you've got the gardener's tools. Wishing, praying, hoping. It's passive, right? It's kind of agricultural. And on the other side, the architect's tools. Protocol, engineering, structural integrity. The source is super clear on this. You can't build a skyscraper with a watering can.
So here's the bottom line, the crucial point. Your desire for something doesn't actually make it happen. What does? The strength of your plan, the integrity of your actions, the quality of your protocol. Without that solid structure, all your wants are just, well, they're just noise in the system.
All right, so let's move from theory into actual biology. How does this stuff apply to the hardware sitting inside our skulls? To actually take control, we first have to understand the command center, the part of us that's responsible for getting things done. So let me introduce you to your internal general contractor, the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. Now, what our source material argues is that its most critical job isn't just thinking or planning. Its real purpose? To inhibit entropy. In other words, its job is to create order out of the natural chaos of our thoughts, our impulses, and everything going on around us. And this just brilliantly illustrates what the real work is. See, you're not just a passive observer of reality. You are actively using your PFC to impose a rigid, logical structure on the world. Basically, you're suppressing the chaos until it has no choice but to take the shape of your intent. So a fair question is, how do we actually measure this force? Well, the source material gives us a clinical formula to calculate our power to engineer outcomes. This is where it turns from a kind of vague concept into a force you can actually quantify. And here it is. This is the formula the source proposes. Now, before you get intimidated, think of this less like a math equation you have to solve on paper and more like a conceptual model, right? Your execution power, this psi symbol, it's basically a ratio. It's your focused effort versus all the chaos and distraction working against you. And the idea is, when you crank up the top part and shrink down the bottom part, you hit this tipping point. And that's when your intent starts to become reality.
Okay, let's really break this down. Up top in the numerator, you've got your focused power. That's your intent, a clear logical goal, not just some vague wish. And that's multiplied by how long you can actually stay focused on it. Down below in the denominator, you've got everything that's working against you, the natural chaos of things, and all the distractions that are constantly pulling at your attention. The whole game is just managing this ratio.
But, of course, every system has a vulnerability. There's always a saboteur in the works, something that introduces weakness. This is the shadow that lurks behind, every failed project and every abandoned goal we've ever had. I mean, think about it for a second. If your PFC is the disciplined general contractor, the one with the perfect blueprints, what's the force that's constantly undermining its work? What's the thing that's building with sand instead of concrete? And here's our culprit, the emotional contractor. This is that part of you that relies on feelings to get things done. It builds when it feels inspired, and it stops when it gets tired or bored. And what does that do? It makes you a slave to your own neurochemistry, and it creates a legacy of sand, a structure with absolutely no integrity. So what this is really telling us is that we have to completely reframe our relationship with the work itself. The goal isn't to enjoy the process. The goal is to persist through the process. Until the architecture is complete, pleasure, totally irrelevant. Persistence, that's everything. Okay, so now that we've diagnosed the flaw and we've put a name to the saboteur, we can finally turn to the solution. This is the actual system that's designed to forge abstract logic into physical matter. It's called the Architect's Protocol, and it's a simple, three-step system for implementation. It's clinical, it's precise, and it's designed to fire that unreliable emotional contractor and replace it with a system of pure, cold logic. All right, let's get into the details. First up, strict specification. This just means you stop using vague language. You don't say, I want to get in shape anymore. No. You say, I will go to the gym 3 times a week, follow this specific nutrition plan, with the goal of losing 10 pounds in 3 months. See? It replaces a fuzzy desire with a sharp blueprint. Then, entropy inhibition. This is where you use rituals and routines as the steel frame to keep things from collapsing into chaos. And finally, the feedback loop. This is huge. You treat failure as pure data, not an emotion, but a prediction error that you just analyze, recalibrate, and run again.
And this is the end state. This is the goal. When you master this protocol, you fundamentally change your relationship with the world around you. You stop chasing outcomes. You literally become the structural integrity, the center of gravity that pulls your desired reality into your orbit, not by chance, but by necessity.
And this is where our source material leaves us, with one final, really provocative thought. You are the architect. The world isn't just happening to you. It's the raw material. It's the clay, just waiting for a blueprint. So the only question left is, what are you going to build?
All right, let's get right into it. The biggest mistake most people make is relying on hope. But hope, in the world we're talking about today, is just a massive energy leak. It's scattered. It's basically a confession that you don't know what you're doing. So we're going to move past all that wishful thinking and get into the cold, hard logic of actually engineering your destiny. And this quote, this is the core of it all. See, the universe couldn't care less about what you want. It only responds to the structural integrity of what you build. Too many of us are out here trying to build a skyscraper with a shovel and a prayer, thinking that our desire is somehow part of the blueprint. Well, it's not.
And that leads us straight to this huge problem, the engineering fallacy, the belief that your desire has any real power. In technical terms, your wanting something has zero signal quality. It's just noise. The only thing the universe recognizes is a solid blueprint that's being executed, period.
So, if the blueprint is so critical, who's the one messing up the construction site? Well, let's introduce the real antagonist in your story. The part of you that's probably in charge right now, your emotional contractor. This is that shadow self, right? Let's be honest. You only put in the work when you feel inspired. You only follow the plan when you get a little dopamine hit from some external praise or a fleeting burst of motivation. And what happens when that feeling goes away? When things get tough, you stop. You abandon the project. You retreat and blame the very chaos you were supposed to control. And the result of all that is what's called systemic fragility. Your entire system is fragile because your output depends on your mood. And you know who loves that? The social collective, the Leviathan. It makes you predictable. It makes you easy to control just by tweaking what you see and hear. If your work depends on your mood, you are not in charge.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly. On one side, you've got the emotional contractor, who's totally fragile, running on inspiration, always chasing that feeling of pleasure. But on the other side, you have the sovereign architect. They're resilient. They don't need inspiration. They have protocol. They're not looking for pleasure. They're committed to persistence. And that's the whole game, moving from fragility to integrity.
This right here is a hard truth most people can't swallow. They have this narcissistic belief that building their dream life should feel good all the time. It won't. The process isn't for your pleasure. It's a stress test. That's its only job, to see if you'll stick with it. If you need it to be fun to keep going, your whole design is already broken. So here's the question you have to ask yourself. If you're looking at your life and realizing your whole method is a blueprint for fragility, for a house of cards, how do you fire that emotional contractor and finally claim your sovereignty? Well, the answer is to install a new operating system, something clinical, something systematic. You have to move from just doing things to building an entire architecture. It's time for the Architect's Protocol. This is the practical logic of engineering your own reality, and it breaks down into 3 clear phases. This isn't motivation, it's a technical manual. Let's dig into each step.
Step 1. Strict specification. You have to stop using vague language. "I want to be successful" is meaningless noise to the universe. You have to encode your intent into strict, measurable parameters. You're not wishing for wealth. You are engineering a system to generate X amount of revenue within Y margin using Z resources. Bottom line, if you can't draw a blueprint for it, it's just a daydream. Okay, step 2 is entropy inhibition. And this is huge. A routine isn't just a boring habit. Think of it as the steel frame of your skyscraper. It's what holds everything together when your emotions and biology are fluctuating like crazy. It's a targeted suppression of chaos. If you need inspiration to work, you're still a novice. If you need a strict routine to work, you're getting very close to sovereignty. And finally, step 3, detached realignment. A true architect has zero emotional attachment to the outcome. Failure isn't a tragedy. It's not an emotional event. It's just a clinical prediction error. It's data. That's it. It's data telling you there's a flaw in your blueprint. So what do? You don't get upset. You analyze the data, you fix the blueprint, and you execute again with a cleaner, stronger signal. So what's the end game? What happens when you actually live and breathe this protocol? Let's look at the final vision, at what it really means to become the architect. This is a complete flip of the script. The entire idea of chasing your dreams or looking for your big break, that becomes obsolete. That's a low-status game, and it's played by the emotional contractor. Instead, you become a gravitational force. The raw, quiet, relentless power of your execution actually starts to bend reality around you. Opportunities are no longer things you have to go out and find. They are things that find you. You become the center of gravity that pulls them into orbit. And that brings us to the ultimate point. This is an identity shift. You stop being a person who is subject to feelings and hopes. You become the architect. And the architect doesn't sit around wishing for a destiny. The architect builds one. So the only real question left is, are you ready to pick up the tools